We're here with me and Seth, and I mean Jesse, and Seth, and we're here to bring you back another great show and engage and talk about different issues. Today we're having a Sunday session, and I think me and Seth was talking that one of the things that we think will be great is to talk about issues like policy issues that more moderates, independents tend to agree with progressives on. We think that this would be a great conversation because at the end of the day, you cannot win any political seat without gaining independent and moderate voters. So it's great that we talk about progressive issues, but we have to also talk about the things that we need voters to care about that are not progressives. And so that's what the conversation is going to be about today. And it's going to be a great conversation. It's going to be awesome. We're going to talk about a lot of things you guys want to hear. But with that being said, I'll let Seth do his introduction.
That was a good introduction. I think it's not a new concept to anybody that you need to bring over independent and swing voters to win an election. That's kind of been the consensus of politicians for the last, I don't know, as long as we've had a two-party system, because that's the only way to win elections. The difference is the Democratic Party has a history of their strategy being purely policy focused on how to bring over undecided voters. So they pick the most down the middle, centrist, conservative leaning economic policies because they think that that's the kind of thing that makes conservatives trust them or want to switch sides because of them. In reality, it's kind of like if it's not fixing the issue, they're not gonna want to switch sides because they are already on their side, and if nothing has changed, they're going to just use that as a chance to attack the other side because of tribalism reasons.
Yeah.
Like the Bill Clinton era, like there was no limit to the amount of hate that conservatives had towards him, despite him being a center-right leaning Democrat.
Yeah.
And he did policy positions, ceding to Wall Street, cutting welfare programs, all the above. Yet you didn't see any sort of Republican be like, oh, well, this Bill Clinton guy, I sure like him. The Democrats are demons to Republicans no matter what. So ceding actual policy positions is not the way to do it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, somebody like Hillary Clinton, another, centrist Democrat, gets nothing but hate but by the Republicans, but despite the fact that she is a centrist, she has very partisan rhetoric. She called all the conservatives, she called them deplorables, like all the stuff that goes straight to their head. She's got a sort of elitist, technocratic way of speaking that is really turns off middle of the road voters or people that live in rural areas. They kind of see her as like, oh, she's the coastal elite. She's not going to care about or understand my issues. She's been so deep in the establishment politics for all these years. Like, it doesn't really matter if you're an actual centrist. Image is everything. Rhetoric is everything. That's why in the 2016 election, the candidate with the most across the board votes, I mean, like the swing voters, the Trump voters were most likely to vote for Bernie other than Hillary Clinton because he was seen as just something else, something new, anti-establishment populist rhetoric, despite him having the most opposite Trumpist views you possibly could.
Yeah.
Not really anything policy-wise that really connects them. It's purely rhetoric, purely about like patriotism and rebuilding our economy, and let's spend our money on domestic policy instead of giving a bunch of money to foreign causes that doesn't affect the average American. Because when liberals speak in a certain way that's technically correct in just such an advanced way that doesn't reach voters, they'll be like, well, if we spend a certain amount of money on international affairs, on foreign aid, and we invest in these certain ways, there's certain soft power stabilizations that keep other countries from, getting diplomatic control over Africa, this and that, just super nuanced foreign policy discussions.
Yeah.
It doesn't really sit well with conservatives or even anti-war left people. The average American voter who's suffering from the economic policies of the United States, they don't care too much about the rest of the world, or at least like the nuanced ways in which we could use foreign policy to help. They
Yeah.
care about the rhetoric of I care about the American people, and we're spending twice as much. We're spending more than the next 10 nations combined on the military, yet we still
Yeah.
can't afford healthcare. Yet we still can. Prices are rising. I can barely afford my rent. I'm this much in debt. These
Yeah.
kind of issues on a global stance does not resonate with a lot of Americans. And then Bernie Sanders is not he's not a moron. There's
No.
a lot of left wing people who just do not understand foreign policy at all. They recognize the issue of our spending and they immediately go into, oh, well, it's just as much the United States' fault for us being in for the Russian invasion of Ukraine because of NATO's imperialism, blah 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 blah. Let's just abolish NATO. Just the dumbest foreign policy takes you can imagine because they don't really understand the issues.
Yeah.
Bernie's not like that. Bernie just doesn't focus on those kind of issues as much. If you really ask him, he would probably be supportive of NATO because NATO is the one thing since the fall of the Soviet Union that has kept Europe out of war.
Yeah.
But you don't see him constantly hammering on issues that are hard to explain and don't resonate with the average American. He talks in short sentences. He talks directly exactly the root causes of problems. And then he talks about the solution. He's very straightforward and blunt. And that's kind of what people liked about Donald Trump. Is because he's just like, we have corruption. It's directly related to the donor class.
Mm-hmm.
It's affecting you and I. We can't pass legislation. We need Medicare for all. Healthcare is corrupt in this country. It's very easy to understand because he's intelligent enough that he doesn't speak to people in his own circles. He speaks to the average American in an intelligent way, but a way that's so intelligent that the average person can interpret it. Because he's like, when you're an elitist and you're in the establishment like Hillary Clinton, you have a sort of assumption of that everybody around you understands certain topics and the
Yeah.
depths and nuances of these certain topics
Mm-hmm.
that most 95% of people would not understand. It would go right over their head. But you have to be a certain level of intelligence to understand these issues and to be able to translate them to the average American.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the root cause of why we have such a dissonance between the conservative side and the liberal side. Is because we are speaking completely different languages, interpreting different news outlets. So we're taking different information and different styles and speaking. We use different language amongst each other.
Yeah.
Conservatives have completely different view of how the political landscape is. Most of them actually legitimately think that there's some kind of rigging of the election in the 2020 election.
Yeah.
Like you have to change a conservative's mind, you have to be a part of their in group because ultimately all conservatism is all the Republican Party is it's a group, it's a tribe, and if
It is. It's very tribalism, and I think that you're 100% right. It's to me, it's not rooted in policy driven stances like you're talking about as a progressive. It's more driven like I'm the strong man. I'm telling you this is the direction we're gonna go, and they just fall in line, and that's what they do. Yeah, it's they just fall in line, and they really, really, really don't challenge their authority. They don't challenge ideas. They don't challenge any democratic. They don't use any democratic process in their thinking.
yeah
They're very narrow dictatorship thinking, which is very different than the credos of their party because their
yeah
party is really strong, focused about independence and free thinking, and limited government. But the reality is they don't do that. They're very strong. They're really focused on making sure that they have a set of goals that everyone follows and a set of ideologies that are really not aligned with the masses. I mean, when we talk about policies and what we find important to us, I think progressives generally believe that ideas and policies move the country forward versus conservatives and Republicans. They really don't care about that. They care about what's the sensational, what's the marketing, what is the 5 second clip I can say to get voters, versus talking about some of the common things that we have an issue with. One of those things like healthcare. I think both sides can agree that the system's broken. And that's a common uh, reality for most people. I mean, for both sides. Um, we hate progressives the way that the healthcare has been taken advantage of in America, and Republicans hate it too. And so we have that commonality, that common issue, and I feel like if we had a candidate that could speak to that can talk to those moderates in that way, in that fashion, then I think that will be able to connect with. It's a universal issue that I think every party agrees that there's an issue there, and I think that that's a topic that we can really dive deep into um, as a talking position in this upcoming election. Because things like, I mean, I think that both sides would agree like healthcare is way too expensive. We would agree that we have Obamacare is like a great start, but it has a lot of issues that we both sides can fix. And I think that we agreed that coming up with a system that involves all parties and understanding that makes sure that most people are covered is the most important thing. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, when I look at what Bernie was positioning and was trying to come out and say, it was very focused on not just on the policy front, but it was really focused on the understanding that the commonality is we don't want our loved ones sick and not have the ability to take care of themselves.
Exactly.
And that was the big thing about Bernie. It's like people felt like his genuineness, and he actually cared. It wasn't so much of the policy of healthcare, more the fact that this guy actually wants to change a broken system. And I think that our policies need to mirror those kind of surface level ideologies that no one ever talks about, the caring part.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what Trump and Bernie both illustrates. Bernie comes from a position of empathy and understanding, and Trump comes at it from a position of fear mongering.
Yeah.
But
Trump's most best faith is he comes at a position of like justice. Like, you guys have been screwed over. These coastal elites are selling away your jobs to China. There's offshoring jobs. They're weak against the foreign countries that are slowly creeping up on us. I'm gonna be the one to defend you. I'm gonna want to drain the swamp. I'm finally gonna do it. I'm not beholden to corporate interests because I'm fund my own campaign. So why? How could I possibly care about the profit motive when it comes to making administrative decisions? Which is obviously bullshit, but it's convincing enough to conservatives who have the core understanding that politicians are bought and sold. At least Trump's not bought. He's funding his own campaign. Blah blah blah. It's obviously
yeah,
not true, but these core values that most Americans share is something that we need to tap into. That's what you're
yeah,
doing.
100%. I think you hit it right on the money, where that Trump and Bernie both resonated well with people. It's like, look, we're here for you. We're here for the masses. Um, we're not we're not taking corporate PAC money, and they both had that same commonality. They both talked about you know government is trying to stick it to you, and I'm here to
Mm-hmm.
protect you. Um, and you're right. I mean that is the very common principle that most Americans like: a fighter, a champion, someone that's not in the system.
Yeah.
One of the things that Americans tend to love is the fact that they don't like people that's been in the system for a very long time. Because reality is, like anything, you do something long enough, you eventually will get dirt on your hands. And I think that America likes the idea of their presidents or their leaders being fresh with fresh ideas,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
not tainted by the system.
Especially because they haven't seen anything happen in their lives from the government to actually help them. So they can't imagine the old ideas we've been passing back and forth. They've clearly been exhausted. We've
Hmm.
tried. It hasn't worked. Nothing's passing through Congress. We need something new, something to shake everything up because nothing's fundamentally changed in my lifetime,
Yeah.
etc.
No, I
So
agree with you.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, yeah, you're right. Nothing's fundamentally changed in their lifetime, and that is kind of the problem. I mean, that's been, I don't know, government's been around since 17, well, way before 1776, but
Yeah, and that
you know,
wasn't our government. We were
yeah,
part of the British government, stuff like that. But I
yeah,
mean, even then, they understood representation when they were being exploited by the British monarchy. When money that they produced was going overseas to some rich asshole who, what did they get in return? It's not like the it's not like England was protecting them. They were so far away, like they had to protect themselves. There wasn't really anything they were getting back from that. Which is
yeah,
brings me to my next point is like America has such an anti-tax uh, base
yeah,
because we don't it's so much of it is wasted compared to other countries. We're not getting anything in return. When we see countries like the Nordic countries, there's a lot less. Maybe the ultra wealthy will push back against high taxes because they have to pay the brunt of it. But
yeah,
they have a society where they value sharing and they value, you know, helping the other guy with the money that they pay out. It's not
yeah,
as much. It's not so dogmatic. They when they get something in return, when they see things from the government, they have health care, they have child care. If they get sick, they can they can have sick leave guaranteed by the government. If they lose their health insurance isn't tied to their jobs. They're not losing a job and their health care.
hmm,
There's just so many things that we do completely backwards that makes us distrust the way that our lives are run because of the way the government is. And
yeah,
it's just a bought system. And even when we talk about these programs, we still have to consider the fact that even if we pass them, we have a Republican Party that will do anything in their power to defund these programs and to completely dereg or what's the word? Not deregulate. Uh,
decentralized.
no. This is the one where they uh, privatize to
Okay,
privatize public goods.
yeah,
Like even roads you have to pay for every road that you drive on. Like you
yeah,
got to pass through in libertarian right wing utopia. Every single road, every quarter of a mile you pass through a toll station to pay for it. Like some things just do not make sense in the private sphere under the
yeah,
capitalist profit market motive. Like it just does not make sense. Healthcare is another one where it just does not make sense, and it's not to be pro government or to want to, oh, I just trust the government to administrate everything. It's no, you don't trust the private market to take things on its back. And we haven't really come up with a better solution. So we just have to take what works best around the world.
yeah,
We can come up with this great idea that doesn't exist yet,
hmm,
but we can't just randomly drop this system that we have to try something completely unfounded and something that has no data or studies. We can't do that system. Everything has to happen progressively, incrementally, and we have to work based on data. And right now, the data shows the Nordic model, when you have a higher tax system that redistributes wealth to the people who need it best. The people who are in situations like mothers are not they don't have high market value. They're not producing anything for the system, except they're producing the future children, the future workers of society, and they have to stay home sometimes. And we can't just let mothers starve. What about single mothers? That can't even be home for their children, and
hmm,
they have all these bills. They have a one income household and they can't even be there. What are we going to do? What kind of community service are we going to do for these children? Like there's so many just black holes in a laissez-faire system that we as a community, as a democracy, have solutions for. If you look around the world, places that do it better, like they are just different demographic systems. Sure, it's a 4 million people country. It's not going to translate the exact same way, but we have economists. We have thousands of economists. We have so many people who know how to orchestrate these systems to work within our system. But we are so scared of anything fundamentally changing because there's risk of things not changing for the worse, which I think it's way less riskier to change things for the better than to keep it as it is, because right now it's not working for pretty much anybody.
Yeah.
Like,
No, I agree, man. You're just try. I think that's what you're
yeah,
saying. It's like, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, no one's ever faulted in history for making an attempt at something. And I feel like we've been very stagnant the last. When did Obamacare pass? In 2008,
2009.
2009.
Yeah,
That was
like 12 years, 13 years ago, 14
13
years
years,
ago.
13, 14 years ago was the last major legislation that passed in
Other than
America.
the infrastructure bill, but
The infrastructure, yes, the infrastructure bills passed. It's hard. You're not going to see impact of that for like another 10, 20, 30 years.
yeah, exactly.
So the most impactful legislation that's passed is,
Most transformative change.
yeah, most times,
Of legislation. I was about to bring up gay marriage, but that's not legislation. Never mind.
yeah, it was done in the judiciary. But
Yeah.
yeah, the legislation, yeah, it definitely was done, was Obamacare. And before that, what was the last major thing? The
War?
19 Iraq War, 2001. So, and then before that, I think we go,
More
probably,
war.
yeah, the war again.
The other war. More war. I mean, Bill Clinton passed some small programs like chips, like,
Yeah,
I don't know, increasing marginally access to abortion care. Like, Bill Clinton did like 10 things, did a couple things that helped us, but
yeah, but major things, I think maybe 5 or 6.
yeah,
We,
nothing
although,
fundamentally. We've had a Republican Party that does nothing but dismantle systems and make them weaker and give people less access to public needs because they want to provide, they want to fill the vacuum with capitalists and people to start up companies. But then we have a Democratic side who just has to spend all their administration pulling back all the deregulation and all the bad policies of Republicans, just trying to get to a neutral state before they can even pass anything. So that's kind of what we've seen with the Biden administration. Pretty much all they've been doing is just rolling back Trump era policies, and many they have not been rolling back, which is absurd. Like the immigration policies of Biden he hasn't done fundamentally anything. No, he hasn't done much with healthcare since the Trump administration. Like they haven't even touched it. So we're not seeing a lot of things benefiting us, even from Democratic administrations. And to be fair, the presidency is not the main avenue for change in our society.
mm-hmm.
The president is just sort of the face of the party, and they sort of, when the president is doing well, the party gets voted in. You know what I mean? So it's fundamentally about the legislation, the legislators, the state, local governments that have to pass legislation. But none of that is even remotely. We're not getting near change because of things like the filibuster, things that are built in anti-democratic parts of our infrastructures, like
Yeah.
like I said, like the filibuster. We can't pass legislation with 51 votes, a majority in the
Yeah.
Senate, which we've had multitudes of times. We would have passed so many forms of legislation if we were allowed to pass things with 51 votes. But no,
Yeah.
we need 40% of the population has more power than 60 for some reason. We think that's a good idea. like, oh well, we don't want the majority to run away with to the majority to terrorize the minority. If you get 51%, they shouldn't get to dictate everything for the 49. We have 40% dictating for the 60% right now. We
Yep.
haven't passed anything majorly like big programs since LBJ when he had above 60 votes in the Senate.
Yeah.
So
That's so true.
we can see how nothing changes, and it's built to stagnate in our system.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the founding fathers is their intent was for our government to be slow. I'm not going to sit there and say that that wasn't their intent. They definitely wanted the government to be slow and not make
Mhm.
fast changes. Um,
But government at that time, we didn't have remotely the same kinds of government. We didn't have democratic governments. We had monarchies. So it makes a lot of sense why you would want to create restrictions on monarchies from dictating how
mhm.
your lives are lived. That's the point. That was liberalism at
Yeah.
its foundation.
Well,
Was
explain that a little bit more. What do you mean by monarchies?
I mean, we were literally eh, like had a revolution against the British monarchy.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
was a it wasn't it was a pre-shareholder capitalist economic system, a mercantile state capitalist system where we still had like the profit motive and private ownership, but it was all dictated from a central authority figure.
Yeah. The
Which,
king.
if preceding capitalism, preceding mercantilism, we had feudalism, which was
Mhm.
you have lands and lords who own all the land. Like I said, lands and lords and whatever, ladies. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Lord, ladies,
Land.
cool
I was thinking
man.
like landlord in my head. Whatever.
Yeah. But no, we haven't changed.
And
But we haven't changed that system. It still exists. The person with the most land, most assets,
yeah,
usually dictate policy and dictate who's going to be the next elected person.
and you
We
have
just change.
the proletariat, the uh like the peasants of the system, basically the
Yeah,
same idea, just leeching off of the next rich person who exploits them, lets them live on land that they only own because they own the military. Essentially, nobody owns land. You can only occupy and protect land with the threat of violence. Like
yeah,
all land ownership comes from imperialism at the end of the day, and who is the bigger army? So
yeah,
they're creating a restriction on who can own land so that if people want to live and not be forever aimless, I can't think of the term of those people, just sort of wander, whatever. People who just sort of
oh, you're talking about geez, what are their
see,
names?
right?
They well, they're common. There were
No, nomads.
nomads. There it
Yeah,
is. I was thinking
there you go.
gypsies,
Yeah, I
gypsies,
know you
and
don't want to say that.
nomads. Yeah, what's it getting there?
We don't want to be nomads. We want to have a land and we want to live there and raise a family. So that you're the only option you have. You don't have an option to like start a co-op in the year 1500. No, you have to work for the landowners, which are just rich noblemen, and they have a consolidation of all the wealth, and you get to keep a minute, just a tiny, just enough to like not die, just enough that you're productive enough to work in the fields and give them what they need out of the fields.
Yeah,
We have not, like you said, the system is built to change slowly, and that's kind of how all of society is reformed. So we have slowly reformed a system away from property ownership dictating everything for society. But at the end of the day, shares of companies are owned by like 5% of the population, and that
yeah,
is where all the profits of every company is centralized in the shares, and some of that money they spend on administration and on buying new supplies and stuff like that, but everything off the top goes straight into the pockets of the people who invested money, people that don't enter the companies that they own, and they don't own the companies generally for more than until they decide to sell their stocks or whatever. So it's not like they have any sort of vested interest in the success of the companies that they own. And the bosses that run the companies are hired by shareholder boards, and their job is to ensure that profits go directly to shareholders, not that their workers are taken care of, not that their lives are good while they're at their job. It's just purely efficiency, or you will get fired, or you won't get your next bonus. So bosses are pitted against the workers in this situation, and they're incentivized to do so. Conservatives always talk about incentives, but they don't talk about the incentives of people in power to not change, to
Yeah.
harm your lives. We have the Marxist theory is that it's about dialectical materialism, about how everybody's looking out for their own material conditions, and the system of capitalism is one where the people who own property, the people who own everything in society, are pitted against the working class. They need somebody to work for them for basically nothing, because if they pay the workers, they have a lot less profits, and then they can't reinvest that money, and they can't make more profits. It makes a lot of sense for them to try to cut corners when it comes to workers, because
Yeah.
what's a worker? They're just going to quit and get a better job eventually. If we have a system where everybody's constantly quitting their jobs because their jobs suck, and they find a new job, and that job after 6 months also sucks, we have a system of exploitation where we always think there's going to be something better, but at the end of the day, you're still working 65% or something of Americans work paycheck to paycheck. People
Yeah.
are making just the bare minimum they need to survive, and that doesn't include how much they owe in debts. Like, we don't have a system built to work for a majority of people. We have a system manipulated and controlled by the people who own property and want to keep their property and not lose any sort of amount of. They don't want to see their bank accounts go down, even a small amount, even if it helps society, because
You just
they don't need the things that society's asking for. They don't
are you
need
talking
help.
about not just like land property, but also intellectual property too.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Property. When socialists talk about property, they're never talking about, oh, the house that you live at, the car that you drive, the pair of sneakers you really like. They're talking about usually property, like intellectual property, or the right to own employment. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? The right to
Hmm.
be an employer, the right to share, like, yeah, like a property of a company, that kind of stuff. It's
Yeah.
more about power than property. And they could pick better words. That's why they distinguish between private property and personal property. But
Yeah.
I forgot my tangent. It's okay.
No, you're just saying. I think you're really focusing on the fact that our system needs to kind of be rewritten in a way where
Not even
people.
necessarily rewritten, because, like we've been saying, things happen progressively. We just need
Mhm.
to aim in a different direction.
Yeah. Well, what's the aim? What direction are you thinking? More people driven economic policies.
Of course, because
Where-
the economy is a people. It's a system designed to distribute income amongst people.
Yeah.
It's a system designed to get people to create efficient systems of distribution of resources. We need a way to get people to get off their couch. We need a way for people to do something that help make society work. Because, like, if everything was guaranteed in the year 1800, you can get whatever you want. Like,
Yeah.
we don't have anything really. We have like wheat fields, but there's no innovation. There's not any, like, society is slowly moving towards a self-sustained system where, like, we are post scarcity. You know what I mean? And when we get to that place, we're not gonna be able to rely on, like, labor to produce an income. Like you've been talking about with AI. Like,
Yeah. I think that's exactly where I was going with AI.
innovation kills capitalism at the end of the day,
Well, it kills the amount of people needed in capitalism.
which is
And
what kills
yeah.
capitalism, because capitalism relies on the exploitation of the worker in order
Hmm.
for them to turn a profits.
Yeah.
A big company can charge lower prices than their smaller competitors, and they can drive out their competition if they're not paying their employees very much. And
Yeah.
there's always trade-offs in business, and there's something that you have to sacrifice. And when the system is decided by the shareholders how it's going to run, they're never going to sacrifice their own shares when they're not going to get anything in return.
Yeah. So now we're gonna have a system where there's shareholders, the 5% you're returning that owns it, dictating the 95% of the people in America who
Yeah.
has who needs work. And that's kind of what I was saying with the AI race. It's just we're already moving towards a society that kind of was driven a lot of workers out of the workforce. COVID was kind of the start of it, and now this Chat GPT is going to be, I think, the nail in the coffin in terms of
At least what ChatGPT is leading to, you know.
what Chat GPT leads to. Not right now. Currently, it's not that
I
smart.
don't think just like a voice system or the system that's like,
No,
what's
the
the capital of
technology,
Thailand, ChatGPT? I don't think that's
no,
going
the
to be
te-
capitalism,
no,
but
the technology is driven inside of it,
yeah,
not actual surface level stuff that people are using.
I agree.
The the ability that this computer now can think for itself, well, to some degree,
Yeah,
think for itself by using information that's already readily known. Now, what happens with that is essentially what it is the computer now can start catching its own mistakes. And what that does is that makes computers more efficient, less reliant on humans to catch those mistakes because the computer now can catch its own mistakes. So I think it just reduces the workforce. A lot of quality control jobs, a lot of manufacturing jobs um, will go away. You have a lot of just regular 9 to 5 jobs that normally didn't need uh, a college education will start going away because I mean, just in banking, why would you need a teller if you can do everything remotely? You
yeah.
know, and these just little basic stuff like that. And I think that that makes up most of the economy. If let me see here, Bureau of Labor Statistics percentage.
Anyways, while you're looking that up, I would
Yeah,
say it's pretty clear that the kind of menial tasks, I mean, we've moved away from these kind of jobs in the past. Like in the early 1900s, we had people like, we didn't have machines the same way. People built every single part of a house, and now we have cranes that lift.
yeah,
You know, we're reducing the need for certain more difficult jobs that we should move away from. And I do think that our society is going to move towards a system where like every single job is going to be an entertainment or something like that. Like you're going to have to be an influencer. You're going to have the late stage capitalism is basically everybody's going to be an advertiser.
yeah,
Everybody's going to have some
yeah.
there. Yeah.
Marketing. You have to have marketing skills.
Yeah.
No, I 100% agree with you because I think that that's where we're going. Because a lot of the jobs that were common to men, they come out with fake chicken. Like they found a way to replace chicken, and it's
Yeah.
like so they're not even growing chicken anymore. So the
Oh, they
farmers are
are. They're probably not in 30 years. They
well
still
they've
have
already
factory farming, but
they've already got fake chicken out now.
yeah,
So
it's once it's cheaper for them to actually use the
make
fake
it.
chicken and not like pack factory farm a bunch of GMO pumped like
Hmm.
circular shaped chickens who have never seen outside of a cage, then we'll probably move past that factory farming like system. Like the vegans and the environmentalists are not the ones that are gonna change the way that we exploit animals and torture them just for their meat. It's going to be capitalism. Once it's no longer profitable, and once people start buying other only like factory farmed or only like freelance eggs and stuff that you see in California, where nobody's buying the factory farm stuff anymore. I don't know.
Yeah.
Once we move away from the profitability of that, then we're only going to see artificial foods like that.
Yeah. Let me show you. All right, I wanted to pull this up. This is
Yeah, pull
something
up the statistics.
that Bureau of Labor Statistics. When we look at the next 10 years, you have utilities, which are, like your light, your water, those people who are hired by those, the light company, the water company, those jobs are going down. You're going to lose about 11,000 jobs in doing that. We have wholesale trade. What else is going down? You also have state, local government jobs are going down.
Hmm.
Federal government jobs.
Take that, conservatives. Talk about the growing government.
Yeah, the federal government jobs are going down.
Yeah,
The jobs are going to increase significantly over the next 10 years. There are going to be jobs in, let's see, transportation, warehousing,
interesting. I feel
infra,
like automated cars, not automated cars, self-driving cars are kind of going to take that away, though, aren't they?
self-driving cars. Yes,
Yeah.
but apparently that technology is not going to do anything in the next 10
Maybe,
years.
yeah, maybe not the next 10 years. You're right.
Yeah. You have information technology that's going to go up, obviously, because AI.
Yeah.
Um,
The
the
people that
bank,
it takes to actually administer the AI systems and make sure mechanics. I don't know.
yeah, the banking system is going to increase jobs.
Banking system. Hmm.
Yeah, that was funny. Professional and business services are going to increase.
Which yeah, like that's kind of like marketing what we were saying, right?
Yep. Healthcare assistants are going to increase.
It's fair.
Hospitality increase, and that's pretty much it. And other service jobs. So, literally, your job outlook over the next 10 years is going to be service jobs, health, teaching, and I will say financial activity, professional business services. They're all connected. So you're going to have to be an office worker.
Yeah.
And
Well, and also I think what we mentioned was like that entertainment is obviously the new. Everybody wanted to be a movie star, but now everybody wants to be like a YouTuber.
an
So
influencer,
I think that's what we're going to move towards, and they're going to be a bunch of they're just getting paid by advertising other companies. But also, I think, like you were saying, a lot of the we'll say like low skill labor, like factory jobs that we're going to be able to automate away,
yeah,
is
yeah,
really going to take away education or take away opportunities for people without like college degrees. So
yep,
a lot of people are the poorest of the Americans are going to suffer the most. The companies in China that really do most of the factory work right now, they're going to be able to buy AI systems to do it for them, and those people are going to lose jobs. So we have to figure out ways to supplement that kind of income because
exactly,
right now, one way is obviously we need to guarantee educational opportunities so that we don't have people who just can't afford education or can't also afford to pay for education because they can't get a job. So there's just going to be people on the streets. Like I live near San Francisco. It's already an issue.
yeah,
People who've been in jail for a certain amount of time and can't get hired because they're like one felony or something like that, they're
yep,
immediately like, "Oh, you're out of the economic system, so have fun on the streets." Like these are the
exactly,
kind of people that are just make one bad decision and their entire lives are altered and they have no sort of opportunities at all. That isn't freedom about having opportunities. Aren't we
yeah,
a country that cares about second chances and about you
yeah,
know we can still get something productive out of people who've made one bad mistake in their life. People can change, people can grow. Like we need to be more empathetic and intelligent about how people actually operate because the economy is supposed to serve the people. It's supposed to create incentives for people to work and a way for people to earn the life, the pursuit of happiness, the everything that they want to achieve. That is freedom.
yeah,
Conservatives talk a lot about negative freedoms, the freedom from. We need to have freedom from government. We need freedom from uh, them taking away our free speech, freedom from them taking away our guns. What about freedom? Freedom to do this. Freedom to spend time with your family.
yeah,
Freedom to not get sick and die because you don't have access to healthcare. Like their freedom is not just something that people can take away from you. It's something that you need to have access to, and
no,
something that needs, like you need to be in a society to be a really free person.
no, I agree with you. I wanted to go touch base a little bit more about some of the statistics I was just
For
looking
sure.
through. Um, I was looking at So they have this breakdown. So everything I was talking about, the utilities, the business side, and the service side, that is essentially professional jobs. When we look at the agriculture jobs in America, you're gonna see that manufacturing is in a negative. So in 10 years, we're gonna be losing manufacturing jobs, which we already have been, but it's picking up rapid. Construction is going to stay relatively safe. Mining work, which is kind of only for West Virginia, but it's uh, it's relatively stable. But
Until we actually replace fossil fuels with like alternative energy, which is inevitable.
it is. That's why it's going down. It's been
Oh,
going down a
what were you
lot.
saying now? I thought you said it was relatively stable or something.
I did say that, but from 2011 to 2021, they lost 219,000. Looks like they went down to 200. They lost 220 jobs.
It probably hasn't changed much because we haven't really done much with
Yeah,
with getting away from fossil fuels as our main source of energy. But
exactly.
it will. It will definitely change.
Yeah, it's going down. It's so we're definitely being less and less relying on it. When
Especially in
you look at our
California.
yeah, when you look at our agriculture self-employed, I think this will be the farmers. That's actually going down over the next. Well, they've been going down for 118, and then now they're
Part
going
of the
down
reason is we don't have like small farmers anymore. We just have like big
mass.
farming corporations like Monsanto's that just buy loads of property and
Yep.
yeah, they'll
No,
just
you're right.
yeah.
It's and then when we look at agriculture in general, there's not many jobs that's going to be projected in agriculture and obviously farming, like you were saying, because of these big massive corporations. Because you, as you were saying that, the wages in agriculture are still relatively stable. So that tells me they're working. They're just not working on small farms.
Yeah.
So 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 as we see this and AI, I think all these numbers was probably before AI is taken account
Yeah,
for it.
for
Because a
sure.
lot of these industries are going to probably be not so much the agriculture or the farm and manufacturing, but a lot of these business profession jobs will be reduced significantly. Um, that's just my opinion. I think that we're just going in a world where it's like very little. Like I just use myself as an example. Like I don't use much things anymore because I have multitude of things that does one thing for me.
True.
You're
Your
like,
iPhone does most of what you need.
yeah, right. So I wake up with my phone, I can take calendar, date, everything else, and I can do a whole bunch of stuff with very little things that I have to go to. And so I just see the world doing that. We're condensing, and we're condensing. And it makes me worried because what happens when you have so much inequality, I think Barack Obama said this in an interview recently. When you have so much inequality, it always leads to uprisings. He
Yeah.
didn't say that exact thing. I'm saying the uprising thing.
Yeah.
Uh, but he was just saying that he's worried about the growing inequality. I I love history, so I study history. Usually, what happens in every society when there's a growing inequality, there's usually a riot or some kind of
Revolution.
revolution
Yeah.
to address that. And that's what I fear because I don't think it's going to happen in 10 years from now. I think America's still strong. But as
Yeah.
nothing happens in a vacuum, everything happens slowly and we degrade slowly, you know, and that's just what happens. And so I think in the next 10, 20, 30 years, if we keep going just down the projection that we're going through, we're going to be a society that's more divided, more separated. Rich are this way, the poor are this way. We
Yeah.
see the world in two different ways. And and I think that both parties are contributing to it
Yeah.
because we're not talking about the things that we have in common, the common
Yeah,
problem.
because both parties, if they have one opposition party, their entire job is to alienate the other side essentially and to, demonize them. And all the problems in society are because of the other party, and it kind of makes it easier for you to look past the crimes of your own party, essentially. And the biggest crime of the Democratic Party is like apathy, just sort of allowing bad stuff to happen instead of actually causing it. Which, if bad stuff happening, like, it doesn't matter as much as who is causing it if nobody's stopping it, you know. But the
Yeah.
real pitch to the independent, undecided voter, it does have to come from a genuine place in your heart. Like, we're both humans and we have the same material differences, the same material problems that we're facing. We're both trying to earn a higher income so that we can afford more stuff in a country where there's rising prices and there's more instability, and we don't know who's going to be president in a year and what direction our country is going to move in.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it doesn't come from a partisan place. It doesn't come from this party does everything great and this party does everything bad, because they've been using the same economic consensus for the last 70 years or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
this, there's not 10, 20 years ago, there was almost no difference between the two parties.
Yeah.
So we are moving in a place where it's becoming to be more stark differences between the Republicans and Democrats, and that makes the pitch a little easier for me. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, class divide is a much bigger problem than cultural divide. The
Yes.
working class Trump voter and the working class Bernie voter are gonna agree a lot more than a Hillary voter and a Trump voter.
Yep.
But at the same time, a Romney voter, a Romney Hillary voter, they're both gonna have a lot more in common than like a Romney voter and Bernie Sanders or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're it's it's like it's the culture is more economic than even partisan or even where you live in the country. It's the people, it's how you make money and what your vested interests are in the country. And culture is a distraction most of the time. And culture is embedded in people's like lives. And the farther they live the longer they live their life, like the more embedded they are in their own culture. Like a culture conservative who's like 70 years old, he's not going to change that all of a sudden become super like liberal about a bunch of stuff. Like, that's not something that's going to change. But
Yeah.
they are at risk of having their social security taken away or having their Medicare stripped. And that's the kind of thing that we can convince voters of. We can show the actual economic policies and the ways in which Republican politicians are lying to them. You have to see that Democrats are also lying to them. A lot of Democrats, because they
Yeah.
already know that. They put all their attention on the ways the Democrats lie. So you can't try to pretend like your side does everything good and their side is everything bad, because all their friends, all their culture, everything is embedded in their side. It's it's a slow process of changing somebody's minds, but you have to. It is an economic focus. It's not a policy focused discussion, but it's an economic focus about
Yeah.
what are the actual problems in society and how are we both screwed by the same system, and what are the root causes. That's when you have to talk about corruption. That's when you talk about how the donor class influences the economic policies and how we can't really pass anything even if we wanted to because of the way our system is built. It's talking about the actual like instabilities of our system that can change somebody's minds. And I do it. I actually, that's one of the things I feel like I'm best at, is talking to more conservative minded people and
Mm-hmm.
convincing them that we agree on most issues based on
Yeah.
how you frame the issues. You have to kind of talk to it more culturally conservative, like, it's all rigged. And the deep state is, when you're talking about the deep state, you're obviously talking about the corporations and the high end social, or the corporate donors and the shareholder class. Like, we're not talking about the same necessarily deep state, because they think it's all just democratic elitists. So you don't
Yeah.
have to talk about specifics, but when you convince them that you share the same core values, then when your minor disagreements come up, they're a lot more likely to have their mind changed. You know what I mean?
No, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Like, we're both are former Republicans, so it's
Yes. I was a Republican 18, 19 years old.
yeah, me too. Well,
Yeah.
actually, I was like a right wing libertarian at that time, but I was a Republican for a while. And I mean,
I,
even the 2018 election was the first time I voted, and I technically voted for Libertarians, Republicans, and like a Democrat or two.
mm,
I voted for the Democrat just because I wanted to feel special, like I'm the super enlightened centrist that can vote across parties. I didn't know the names or what they really stood for, just to clarify. But
yeah,
like, we know what it's like to have our minds changed over time,
yeah,
and
exactly. Well, I never voted for a Republican. I was a Republican,
yeah,
never voted for one, which was weird.
yeah,
You
sorry.
know,
But we
but
both
yeah,
know that being shamed out of your views is not how you change your mind.
no, I just grew up. I mean, I was a Republican because I was Christian, so a lot of it, was based on that. And then, yeah, so, but as I started diving deep into policies and I started to look at the way I was raised
Mm-hmm.
and how far I got because of the government, that's when I started changing my ideology.
Yeah.
Because if we keep the Republican viewpoint of conservatism, there's no real place for an African American like me, or not just African Americans, but Filipino, any immigrant, or any person who doesn't come from wealth
Yeah.
to make it in American society, because
Mm-hmm.
the idea is it's not progressive. The idea is to conserve what we already have. So
Yeah.
the foundation is not to build people; it's to keep the rich from being rich
Yeah.
and keeping the status quo. That's literally the foundations of the party. So for me, I understood that it was important to appreciate and understand what is it that where I came from and how I got to where I you know to where I'm at, and it was because of a lot of democratic social policies that
Yeah.
got me there. I now, do I think there's you know, I'm open to hearing any idea, but
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, progressive ideas like Lyndon B. Johnson, like affirmative action, like a lot of the things that helped get me to where I'm at, was because of social policies. So I can't. It was hard for me to raise in my head like, how can I be a Republican? But if I was a Republican, could I actually get where I was trying to get to?
Yeah.
And no Republican really, no Republican can be serious and genuine, Tim Scott, and sit there and say that, that the Republican agenda helps push and progress people of diverse background,
Yeah.
being poor working families to minorities to immigrants from all over. And that was just, that's my 2 cents. That's why I switched. Uh,
It's interesting that it was like more policy focused issues that changed your mind, but you
yeah,
were studying to be like a lawyer and stuff. It makes sense. When my
yeah,
mind was changed, I was still in my formidable years, and it was actually seeing the hypocrisy of I've always been sort of anti-authoritarian. I don't trust government and bureaucrats, which is kind of a value across most Americans. But seeing the Republicans campaign on that stuff and being on their side and seeing them win and drop all their values
yeah,
just to pad Trump's ego.
yep.
Even the stuff that they were saying campaigning against Trump, Ted Cruz, all the stuff. See my dad hate Trump because he's a terrible man. He's not a good Christian. He's not an honest man. This and that. He's a corrupt businessman. And seeing him alongside the entire Republican Party drop all their criticisms just for the achievement of power, and not care so much about the constitutional things that they talked about and about, oh, the federal branch shouldn't have this amount of power to change this and that. It all dropped as soon as they were the ones in powers, because at the end of the day, they were just being dissidents. They just opposed democratic administration. They didn't oppose government. So watching them prove that they were not really the party of small government or the party of, uh, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. No, they have corporate subsidies and they have all this stuff. They don't care about pull yourself up by the bootstraps. They're the ones begging to keep their own money. You know what I mean? Like they're not trying to take matters into their own hands or whatever. They're asking for bailouts just like everyone else, except theirs are privileged and they don't need it. That's the difference.
There's a meme going around Twitter
Yeah.
It shows all the Republicans who who took the PPP loans.
Oh yeah, you're right.
They all got they've all been forgiven. I just thought that was funny.
And they're
I
all
just
like, we can't have student loan giveaways, handouts like this. And then it's like Marjorie Taylor Greene accepted $500,000 in loan forgiveness. Yeah, exactly.
it's
The
like the
Republicans are the party
hypocrisy.
of hypocrisy, and like it's easy to fall for their rhetoric when you're part of the tribe and you don't see the rhetoric of the other side. I don't know. It's very easy to be trapped in that mindset. But when you really critically examine who is being hypocritical and what the parties are, the actual policies they're passing versus what
Yeah,
rhetoric they espouse, it, it's not doesn't necessarily push you in the Democratic Party, but it definitely makes you think twice about Republicans.
exactly. But that being said,
Yeah.
I think we should live off on this note from the great George Washington in his farewell address in 1796. However, political party may now and then answer popular ends, they are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which we have lifted them to unjust dominion. Essentially, what that's saying is that political parties always start off with good intentions, just like the Democrats and the Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, those intentions turn into greed, it turns into
Self-preservation.
self preservation and thirst of power.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they have that, they no longer work for the people, but for themselves. And I think that this kind of illustrates what we're trying to say in today's show is just
Mm-hmm.
understand that these parties are encompasses of America and they're the party of the people, just like America is is the nation of the people.
Yeah.
And it's up to us, like progressives, and any other person to call them out and say, "Hey, you're not focused on the people. You're focusing on your self preservation."
Yeah.
And I think that that's something we should think about, going forward as a country. Is who's working for who, and vote out the people who's not working for you.
Both sides, like
Both
both
sides.
parties have preferential candidates. There's
Yeah,
crazies on both sides, and most usually the crazies in the Democratic Party are not left wing. They're pretty standard corporate
mo- yeah,
types.
moderate people. Yeah,
Yeah.
Republican light.
Yeah, exactly.
um, but yeah, guys, I know we're going on an hour here, but what we're gonna do?
We won't be streaming on Tuesday, both because it's 4th of July, and I'll be working. So we'll figure out whatever the next episode is.
Sometime next week. It's
Yeah.
just not gonna be on the 4th. Happy 4th of July,
Happy
guys.
4th of July. United
Yes.
States Revolution, still a good revolution. You know, fuck the British monarchy.
Mighty for the people. you know,
Yeah,
and let's start a new revolution, like Bernie says.
yeah, but not like a violent revolution, a revolution of love.
No, no. The revolution of ideas,
Yeah,
not violence.
of course.
All right, guys.
We can all come together. All right.
All right, guys. See you.
Thank you guys. We'll see you next episode. All right. Goodbye.